So let's look at the biblical foundation for missiology. And that really sprouts from looking at the Bible as a story of mission. Our textbook for this course really bases missiology on that. And in particular, by incorporating the Old Testament as much into this biblical basis as the New Testament. So we all have a story, and so does God. The Bible is a narrative where we see God's interaction with people and people's interaction with God. But what is the overarching story? Well, the proposition here is that the overarching story, the meta narrative, is one of God's mission. So we can present the story of the Bible as a play in acts, if you will. One way to do it is to present the story of the Bible in 6 acts. I like it as God's peaceful community. We all long for peace. Jesus said, "My peace I leave with you." So it would look something like this. And this is loosely based on the way that N.T. Wright points that out. In Act 1, God creates an harmonious community, and it's perfect. Then we would get Act 2, where the community takes measures in its own hands. We can do it ourselves. Act 3, which leaves us still in the Old Testament, provides a promise of God to one day restore that community and takes Israel's community as an example of what that would look like. Then there is a 400-year time period called the intertestamental period between the Old and the New Testaments, where Israel's community actually suffers and yearns for freedom. Then Act 4 starts with the arrival of Christ. The Word becomes flesh. And during the life of Jesus, during his mission, he forms a restored community. We get the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. And at the end of his mission, as he ascends, he leaves the church. And so the church then next lives out this community of peace. It's the church's mission. Act 6 has not yet happened, but that would be the community of God fully restored. The story comes full circle. What I like about this story is that we see it as a grand narrative, and we see the importance of the interludes, the pause, the intertestamental periods. I firmly believe that we cannot understand the New Testament without understanding what happens in the 4 years in between, the intertestamental periods. Now, there's 2 ways then to look at the Bible in light of missions, right? You can view the story of the Bible as a big story, and then missions as a part of that story. So you can find Bible verses that support going out into the world and share the good news of Jesus. Or you could say God's mission is the plot line of the biblical narrative. And in this course, we will do the second, as will your textbook. So the textbook shows the great story, the biblical story, as a drama in 7 acts. It does not highlight the intertestamental periods. So it shows it as creation, rebellion, promise, Christ coming, mission, and then judgment and new creation. Anytime you get a textbook, anytime you read something throughout the course, people will give their theological persuasion. You may love the way this is outlined, or you may have questions of this. It absolutely portrays the theological inclination of the author. It doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with all of that. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with all of that. It is one way to view the overall story. For me, what I like about it is It recognizes the mission of God as the overarching story of the Bible. Do I think it's exactly in these 7 acts? No, you've already seen my preference, right? But it's one way to encapsulate it. So it emphasizes this idea of creation and then commissioning Adam and Eve. It pays attention to the fall of humanity and God's promise. It absolutely emphasizes this idea of covenant. Now, covenant is important. In some denominational traditions, that is very strongly emphasized. In others, it's a part of the story. In the Old Testament, we see this idea of the formations of tribes and tribal structure, and then headed into the time of the judges, and then kingdoms, and then Israel and Judah going into exile. And then, of course, we skip the intertestamental period in this particular one. You already know how I feel about that. But then Jesus comes on the scene out of the line of David, and he brings redemption. And then the inauguration of the church as living out God's mission and the witness of the church. This is not where mission starts, but this is how the witness of the church tells the story as it has been narrated throughout the centuries. And then it looks forward to new creation. And this will come about in this course as we talk about creation care as a form of mission. All right. So stay with that as we progress through this course.